What is up, family? I am here with Ryan, the all-star from Veve, and man, we wanted to kick back with you guys today. We wanted to chill out, have some fun. He's on his car right now, and can you believe it or not, that's his phone that's giving this 4K amazing picture quality.
Yeah, man. My son's sleeping at home. I was working outside of my house today, and I just pulled off into a parking lot. I'm actually in a Home Goods parking lot, so maybe I'll stop there afterwards and get some coffee, maybe something, a gift for my wife. But yeah, I also got my Panera coffee, so I'm part of the Sip Club, and $10 a month. You better believe I'm getting my money's worth. So it's gonna be a fun time today, dude.
Dude, I'm excited, man. And I always appreciate you coming on because, I just know how busy you are. But then I also see you all over spaces as well, giving your perspective, tuning in. It's amazing how, like, you guys are still so involved in the community despite how busy your workload is?
Yeah, it's a good point to bring up. I mean, it gets crazy at times, right? Like there's so many different things that have to take your attention and there's always something new and different, but I think the most important thing at the end of the day, right, especially after kind of like the craziness of the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks was just like letting the community know that they have a voice and their voice is important and it's being heard. And so, I'm very intentional when I go into a space or just engage with the community in general to try to collect as much feedback as possible, whether it's right, wrong, bad, or good. Like it's all important and it all helps shape how to understand what's actually happening better, right? So I look at my job is that's probably the most important thing I could possibly do, really, is to be constantly communicating and engaging with the community.
It's amazing that you say that because I feel like just by the amount of times you've been present in a lot of these Twitter spaces that I would imagine you probably have almost like the deepest connection with the community in terms of what they're feeling and what they're going through and their emotions and like I feel like you're really kind of grasping the gist of like everyone, the good, the positive, the ugly. Like I think it's just important to get a flavor of everything. So kudos to you, bro, for doing that.
Thanks, man. I actually also I genuinely enjoy it. So I just genuinely enjoy being a part of the community.
Yeah.
I'm probably a community member before I'm a VV team.
Yeah.
um, and I see some questions popping up. What's up, Kay? I see you down there, man.
Yeah, what do you think of that? So he goes, "Hey Ryan, have you followed up to raise funds and promote support for the Turkish earthquake victims? Team said it'd be looked into, but haven't had an update. So I don't know if you,
Yeah, I
if you know."
think what I know Kay put something out there about that. Obviously, what happened in Turkey is horrible.
Yeah.
It's very sad, and there's a lot of people being affected by that. I don't know what the plans are to initiate a support for them. I know that there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes that Veve supports that really isn't necessarily always public, right?
Hmm.
So their team and the people that are leading that front, they're doing a lot of different things to help a lot of different organizations that we don't always see on the front lines. So yeah, once I learn more about whether or not there's actually going to be a front facing initiative to bring raise support for that, I would put it out there. But that's all I know at this moment.
Thanks, man. And Ryan, one thing I really wanted to get you talking about today is I threw out a question on Veve about 2 days ago, and I
Yeah.
said, "What's the safest bet for the long term in terms of like digital assets?" Right? And I had like a whole gamut of like responses that came from that. So I was kind of hoping to just walk you through at a high level, kind of what people said, and just hearing your take and what you think. Would that be cool?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's do it.
All right, sweet.
I love that you have the screen up too. It's like super, super great.
Yeah, so basically I just said safest bet for the long term. And we got so many answers, right? So they're like Todd, a lot of people are saying big IP, less than 1,000 mints, first exclusive Marvel cover. A lot of people said Grail common comics because they
Hmm.
were saying that like, oh, it's something that you can't actually get in the real world, but then you can buy it on Vivi for like an extreme fraction of the cost, and it still is, you know, potentially shared IP, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of like the common thread was like top tier comics, lower mints are a bonus. And other people are saying MCP points. Obviously, that's a good one. With like, you know, SR AF15, SR Spidey, and Miles being at that top.
Yeah.
But yeah, what are your thoughts on this? I don't know if you saw some
Well,
of these responses.
yeah, I looked through the thread even before we jumped on here, and I think
Yeah.
it's interesting. The one that there's two letters that pop out pretty frequently is AF, right? And then the number 15.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that. But I'm interested to hear from you first, Chad. Like, what's your position on it?
Well, it's interesting to hear that in the reverse, like somebody asking my perspective. I appreciate that. Yeah, so my thing is, you know, one thing that we saw in the last bull market is we saw a lot of the things that were higher editions but very popular really run up in value when we did have the masses. So I fear that if we don't get the masses again, then, you know, then we won't see that kind of same run happen with a lot of these kind of Grail commons and things like that. But what I do think is very possible is like if I'm an investor and I'm coming into it in 5 years from now, I think what I'd be most concentrated on are the things that have a really easy comparison to in real life value. So I would be like, okay, AF15 is worth 3.5 million. There's 10,000 editions of this. It's $335, or even if it was $3,000, to me, it would make sense as an investment to be like, oh, this is AF15 as an NFT into the digital age. You know, I'll invest in that. So I feel like Grail comics to me make the most sense as like the safest bet, with a lot of these other things like collectibles and all that still being speculative, as we don't know if there's going to be tie-ins or spawning in terms of like gamification, discounts at stores, potential avatars, skins, like all that stuff maybe does kind of happen in 5-6 years and the relationship gets bigger with Marvel or whatever. But I just think that in terms of like an easy bet, I would say comics at this point. So I don't know, like a Grail comics. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. As a kind of somebody, Ryan, what did you buy at Walmart?
What's up, superstars?
I'm actually in Home Goods parking lot, but maybe I'll skip over to Walmart, you know. But no, so I actually share a lot of the sentiment that you just mentioned. So you know, the in real life value of things matters is important because it's just realistic and in our face, right? Like it's something that we can put hang our hat on, right?
Yeah.
Like when like if you talk to people that are into comics, whether it's Marvel, DC, Disney, like specifically Marvel, they'll point to Amazing Fantasy 15, the first appearance of Spider-Man, right?
Right.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, can hear you well.
Okay. Yeah, so they'll go to Amazing Fantasy 15, first appearance of Spider-Man. It's in real life value, like you said. I think it sold for 3.2 million. It's huge, right? And so I think for me, when it comes to safest bets, I personally like to collect AF15 or things revolving around Spider-Man FAs, right? So like not just AF15. There's the first appearance of the Lizard. There's first appearance of the Sandman.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have first appearance of so many of these other characters that are so important to the arc of Spider-Man. And I'm a fan of Spider-Man. And when you look at the real life comparisons of those comics, they're extremely scarce and they're extremely valuable. So for me, yeah, I think when it comes to safest bet, like you had put it, I say the low edition run in real life valued comics, the comparisons that are in the app.
Right. And like, so I love that you know, we kind of both see that as the best potential. And I think what's interesting about that too is like a lot of the comics that you guys are dropping now, like for instance, Tales of Suspense number 39, you know, if this was back in the day, like a year ago, you probably would have made that a 60,000 edition run, but now it's a 10,000 edition run.
Mm-hmm.
and there's only 250 secret rares. And like my thing is like, what, you know, there's just massive potential if this all pops off. But one of the biggest kind of critiques is the interoperability component. And I know that you've been having a lot of those conversations, and people are saying like, well, if we can't ever take it out of Walmart, you know, is it really your own NFT? And it does that have to evolve? And there's a lot of people in that camp that are like, oh, well, we want to see that happen first. So yeah, so that's kind of the conversation, I guess.
I also have to address this comment. The filters or enhancements you guys are both using makes it look like you guys have face makeup on, like the people on the news. Yeah, that's our goal, is to be on the news.
No.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. So any
So
thoughts on
let
that?
let me ask you something, Chad.
Yeah.
And I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but I feel like we're
having a chat. We're having a chat.
we're having a chat. Yeah. So for you, right? Your pros, your cons. When it comes to Veve, you know, when you first got into this ecosystem,
Mm-hmm.
like what were the major reasons you got into it in the first place? And then moving forward, as you've seen things unfold in the market shift, not just practically in Veve, but just overall, right? There's different projects out there. There's different things happening, world economic affairs. How do you see it moving into the future? And what would be the things that you deem really, really important to the success of Veve, but also digital assets as a whole?
Interesting. So yeah, so when I first came into Veve, the biggest draw for me was licensed IP, because I thought that it was like trustworthy, and I thought there could be long-term sustainable growth similar to like a potential mutual fund. And then I started thinking about it like comics. Like I was like, okay, we had the first appearance of something significant in the real world, and now it's the first time that these same things are dropping digitally. So that was my draw. And I thought that it is a speculative asset. So it's like kind of like low risk with the potential for massive gains. And then I was also presuming that at some point, you know, long term, it would be kind of interoperable. And I think fast forwarding to today is that I still have that same thinking. Like, you know, I look at DC right now and I look at like Superman #1, and I know that they're looking at going interoperable and transitioning the back cows and everything. And, you know, DC and Marvel are kind of the two biggest competitors in that space. And I only imagine that these NFTs at some point, even if it's not full interoperability, but some kind of interoperability would, you know, potentially one day I'd be able to take those GSX1s, those AF15s, those Black Panther FAs, and just throw them all in a cold storage, or have some more understanding of how that would work. Because I do agree that sometimes like the centralized component, as much as it's so beneficial in terms of, you know, having our assets be safe and by Veve, like I still worry about like, oh, what if something does happen, or what if you know, like I get restricted. Not that I would, because, you know, I've got my brand. I'm talking to one of the major players.
You're a legend.
Yeah, but just I wish. But just like learning from everyone, I could see the concerns on that end. But I think it's like, to me, the risk reward ratio is so high, because when I look at like some of these things that are dropping on Veve and the potential magnitude of what they mean, that I'm like, I'd rather take that risk and still continue to collect and everything like that. So that's kind of where, that's like my honest kind of truth on the whole space right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. I don't think I've ever well, I guess revisiting like the reasons why we enter in the first place and trying to understand our purpose for doing things is like really important. You know, I try to ask myself those questions, you know, on a weekly, monthly, try to revisit like my whole perspective on this space and why I'm even here. Right.
Right.
And so, you know, it's interesting to hear somebody like you talk on it, because, you know, me and so many other people trust your perspective on it. Like I even remember too, you know, you've brought a lot of people into the space, but one of the major reasons why Sean from Comics and Crypto was so fascinated and more interested in this space is because you started talking about things in the terms of first appearance, right? First appearance of Batman licensed NFT on the blockchain, in digital format, right? You started talking about it in that way, and it like was a spark for people, right? And so I just really value
Thanks,
like
buddy.
your perspective on why you're even here in the first place.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And put it this way, like I'm still super bullish. Like I said before, like the more that I talk with the community, the more that I learn about all the different perspectives, the more that I see the grand rising. And the way that I look at it is like, some people will say, "Oh, we could just be a fad, like Beanie Babies. NFTs may come and go, etc." But what I'm understanding is that like I never saw NFTs as like this money making thing. I saw it more as like the continuation of the most like beloved assets in our physical world now being able to be preserved
Yes.
forever through the blockchain. That's how
Yes.
I envision this space. So when I look at like OpenSea, and don't get me wrong, great projects out there, but some of them are all new IPs, things to me that the way that I always viewed it was like, the fact that they're going to have this scarcity and these insanely important items still licensed by the same players now being integrated over into a new digital revolution and then being able to be kept for like the long term and being able to use it, having way more of a use case in the future, not just like a slabbed comic, being able
Yeah.
to maybe show it in an office, read it in an AR, rent it out, like all these different things that we can't even fathom now because we're yet to enter the metaverse.
Mm-hmm.
Though that's the way that I see it evolving,
I have an example to build on that
Mhm.
in a broader sense, but also very specifically too, right? So we saw Tales of Suspense 39 just drop with first appearance of Iron Man, which is a huge comic, especially now that he was pretty much the starter of the MCU, right? Like the first Iron Man movie was the inspiration to that whole entire series and
Right,
how that evolved, right? So
right.
over time, it is going to become just such an important piece of history. But you look at it, and if you go to Go Collect, there's only one 9.8, or I don't even think there is. I think there's one 9.8 graded comic of Tales of
This is,
Suspense
there is.
39,
It's
right?
insane.
That's
Yeah,
the census, right?
yeah.
And I think Sean from Comics and Crypto mentioned that if that went to auction, it would probably be worth around 3 million, close to AF-15, right? So you look at that, and then I think to myself, what if that burned down in a fire? Right? What if that got
Right.
destroyed in a fire? Or what if, a lot of the people that have these really scarce comics in real life, like they pass away and they're thrown away, or people don't understand the value of them, or they get destroyed whatever could happen, right? But now you come to Vivi and you see all of these amazing first appearances on the platform, and it's almost like a preservation system for these Grail comics that may deteriorate over time in the real world,
You
right?
got it.
So I look at, there's only going to be 10,000 editions of AF-15 in the blockchain. There's
Like think
only
about
going to be,
I know.
10,000 editions of so many of these Grail comics in the blockchain, right? And so I look at it as a preservation system in a way for comics specifically, because the in real life deterioration of those things is so unpredictable. Um, the example I wanted to use in a broader sense, when you talked about, you look at the blockchain as a preservation tool for things being put into the digital world, right? So,
Right.
like, I was just listening to a podcast. It was fascinating. This person started a company that uses the blockchain to create digital twins of corporate businesses, right?
Mm,
So essentially, what they do is they work in construction, and they're making digital twins of every item they use on a construction project to put each item in the blockchain to better understand the life cycle of every single item they use, right? So, for instance, like, they were talking about painting a room with green paint. They would actually make a digital twin of that green paint, the serial number, the name of it, everything like that, to be able to track that asset in the blockchain to see how its life cycle played out and how it would be transitioned and recycled in the real world,
damn.
right? So now you can start to actually track every single asset that's being used in real life, right? And so a better example I even heard was they were talking about old jewelry that might have been handed down to you from your grandma or something, right?
Wow, I
So a
love that.
woman loves jewelry, but that piece that was handed down to them, they love the nostalgia of it. They love seeing it. They love thinking about it, but they won't necessarily wear it, right? So they actually, this company would create a digital twin of that asset in and put it on the blockchain so it's preserved forever. And then they would take the precious metal that the jewelry was made out of, and then they would recycle it in the real world. So now you're using a small precious metal to recycle, to save in the real world energy or resources,
Jeez.
right? But you always have it stored in the blockchain. Now I look at the practical use case of why this might be valuable in the future, right? For instance, if the Queen of England, had all these jewelry pieces, and they were going to recycle them, but all their digital twins were in the blockchain, and now you could own actual physical or digital pieces of the Queen's like handed down jewelry, right?
Wow.
So they brought up these use cases, and I'm sitting there like, dude, this is why the blockchain is important. Like that's the most practical use case I could ever think of, why the blockchain is needed in a functioning society that's going to become very much so digital.
Right.
So I don't
Right.
know if anything I just said made sense, but
No, I mean it made perfect sense, and I mean, and I think it also speaks to the how this is all going to be, adopted to the mainstream very soon, and everything will essentially be an NFT where it won't even really be a conversation. Like blockchain will just be like inherently kind of maybe not understood in terms of the, the engineering and the software development and all that crap, but in terms of just like the understanding that, oh yeah, like this is on a ledger and this is my, like, you know what I mean? That's the stuff that I think one day will be like commonplace, right? Like you buy a Rolex watch and you also get the counterpart to that and for your avatar, and it's like that's kind of what it is, right? So I love that you bring that up, and it goes to show you where we're headed, right? Like so
yeah. The other
these yeah.
another another kind of example of this, thinking about it more, is like I think about it in terms of like marketing. So one of the things that when I was going through college that we were tasked with was to go on big corporations' websites and say, okay, how can they make this better? What do they need to do from a PR standpoint to incorporate to better engage with the people that are coming to the site? And one of the biggest things that we would always propose was corporate social responsibility initiatives, right?
Mm.
Because a lot of these big companies, they're not publicly announcing what they're doing for the community in which they're serving, right? So we would propose that they introduce some type of corporate social responsibility, whether it's partnering with a nonprofit or donating funds, so much money that they get in revenue to an organization, whatever it may be, right? So now let's take this one step further, right? It's not just going to be corporate social responsibility. I believe in the future, 10 years, that it is going to be a requirement to build public trust to operate your business on a blockchain ledger. So I could also almost see you going to a website and a company actually putting as a link on their site our blockchain ledger, basically tracking all the assets in which we're using to make our business run.
Wow.
As a way to increase trust and transparency with the public as more and more people see the actual practical function of what the blockchain is actually designed to do.
So that is fascinating because I remember Reese back in the day said to me, a lot of people presume the blockchain is like the Wild West where anything can happen, but it's actually the reverse of that. It's actually cleaning up things and allowing you to see what's actually going on behind closed doors that we haven't been able to see through Wall Street or some of these big corporations where they're like avoiding taxes overseas and doing all these scams, and while the citizens are paying for taxes out of their ass. So like you said, that's the amazing part of what's happening is that like you won't be able to avoid those kind of things long term because there's a permanence to them, right?
Yes, exactly. And it goes to show, like, if you go to any big website now, you'll see corporate social responsibility. I look at blockchain ledger for a business being that same type of thing. Once the public starts to understand how the blockchain forces your hand in transparency, and makes you, like, how many times have you heard of businesses cooking the books, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How do you cook the books anymore, right? Like, that
Yeah.
cannot happen. It forces people's hands to act and function in an ethical way. And so, yes, it's awesome to own NFTs. Yes, it's awesome to, um, get into this digital world. But really, the blockchain becomes important for practical use cases in which we would need it to function in an everyday society. So I'm trying to learn more about that aspect to really understand the heart of why we're even here and talking about the blockchain in the first place.
Yeah. No, I totally hear what you're saying, man. I mean, that's the way that I've always envisioned it as well. Is just like it's kind of like progression of what practices we've already had, and it's kind of like, okay, well, how do we ensure that there's, like you said, more transparency, more availability for confidentiality, more understanding of what's actually going on, and then on top of that, having some kind of security for the stuff that you own, right? And I think that's like, there's so many good counterfeits out there. I think I told you, but like one of my buddies, has a Rolex watch, a really nice one. It was a Daytona Datejust, and he was telling me about, like, there, you can buy them now for like $300-400, and there's such minute differences on the two different Rolexes that, like, to the naked eye, you actually can't see it anymore. You'd have to get like a microscope and actually be trained and be able to look at like the precision of the tools, the functioning of the watch, the mechanics, how long, like it would be off by maybe 12 more seconds a day rather than the actual pristine one. But he's like, with the blockchain, we're talking about this, like if you're wearing that around in the metaverse, like hopefully there's something that would like be able to transparently say like this is real or this is fake. You know what I'm trying to say? So like I said, it's not going to get any more simpler. It's probably going to get more complicated, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about like interoperability, right? Like that's kind of been in this season of Veve and just owning digital assets in general. That's kind of been like the thread of conversation, right? Because you talk about true ownership. I threw out a tweet the other day, and I just listened to a podcast talking about like the Restrict Act. I don't know if you know anything about it, but it's been a huge
I don't.
thing that's been being discussed in the crypto kind of ecosystem right now, just because of all the language in there that is being speculating that they're kind of attacking this whole thing that we're doing right now. But the person on the podcast said something that just hit me in the face, man. And he said, we need to own our digital selves in the same way we own our physical selves. Because of how much time we're actually spending in the digital world, it is extremely important to be able to translate everything that's happening in the digital world to be able to have that same ownership as if we were to do things in the physical world. And that just hit me like a ton of bricks because it makes so much sense. Like when I go on Facebook, I don't own the algorithm that tracks me to put a bunch of content in my face based on what it thinks I might like. I don't even know if that algorithm's written to put things in front of my face based on a certain time in the world, right?
Right.
Like, for instance, election stuff, right? Maybe Facebook writes algorithms 6 months before the elections happen to start putting election stuff in front of my face, regardless of whether or not I'm involved in politics, right? Like, I don't own any of the algorithms that are putting things in front of me. So when he started talking about this, I really started thinking to myself, like, why aren't we emphasizing more that we need to own the algorithms and we need to own the types of information that we're going to be exposed to? Like, we don't own any of it. We're completely controlled by algorithms that massive corporations own, write, and use for a manipulative type of agenda. So when it comes to like self-custody, interoperability, digital ownership, like I don't just look at it as important when it comes to NFTs and digital assets. Like, it's important when it comes to the very basic fact that we're going to go onto an app and do something on it. Like, we should be able to completely dictate what we see, what happens on it, and what we want, right? And we need to get to a place where those things are operating in the blockchain and with complete and total interoperability, so we can take kind of ownership of it. Like, that's something that I want to learn a lot more about.
So that's fascinating. And like, I love that you went there because, you know, as you know, like you just explained, currently all those algorithms from each company kind of already exist. And it's almost like a digital replica of like the person that we are in a very limited way. But if the data does get collected when we're in the metaverses on top of that, and we're moving around and doing these different patterns, going to talk to different people, all that stuff will continue to be collected. And then, you know, little subtle suggestions would come in daily to like remind you to go out to McDonald's, or to remind you that you like to see porn at this time of night or whatever. And it would totally misguide, like when you're thinking that, like, this is where the world to me is going, and this is where it becomes concerning, is that you will think that you're making your own decisions, but it's actually your environment influencing those decisions for you, to actually not even being able to left up to your own demise, right? It's just similar how we already see society now, where, like, you know, people just presume things like, oh, you get married, oh, you have kids, all these things that, like, the construction, you know, you go to get your 4-year art degree because this is what you need to do. But like you said, you know, like all this stuff is constructed, and so I worry about, you know, them constructing that for us and having more intel, so to speak.
Yeah, they are. Like, I mean, if you look at it, right, and this isn't like conspiracy theory talk, right? This isn't conspiracy theory. This is reality. This is happening. These algorithms were kind of like a cool thing when these companies started. They started like tracking things and being able to develop on top of them. But it's almost become like this monster that's eating itself and getting larger and larger and larger, to the point where we no longer have any control over how it's kind of operating and functioning. And so, as I'm learning more about like interoperability and ownership and blockchain, it was really created for the purpose of combating all of that. Because if you are no longer the subject to all these algorithms that control everything you see, then you now retain so much of your freedom and autonomy again, right? That we didn't even know we lost in the first place. We don't even know that we're being manipulated by Facebook. We don't even know that we're being manipulated by Instagram. Not to mention all the things that could happen in the blink of an eye now. You see, they shut down content that they don't like. They put slap stamps of approval on things just randomly if it has a keyword, right? So getting back to a place of ownership of our content is extremely, extremely important, so people cannot control what we say or think. Like, that is why this whole entire space needs to exist. It needs to be protected, and it needs to be talked about more and more and more.
So Ryan, that is so crazy that you say it, because I want to show you an example of exactly what you're talking about, right? Of like how like our information is being controlled, right? So well, so if I put it in France right now on Instagram, right? I don't know if you can see this, but like this is pretty much what happens. It's all these nice pictures, you know, pretty girls, etc., right? Now you go over to TikTok, watch this, and I'm gonna put it in, because this is where things get a little wacky, because then you start going, oh, wait a second here. So watch this. I'm going to put France in TikTok.
Real-time application, man. I mean, it's just plain as day.
And everything that's going to show is all the protests. I don't know if you can see that.
Wow.
Right? Everything, like the fires, like everything that's going on, right? So it's like a whole different algorithm. And like that's just, and so like when you see like TikTok right now, the states is going, oh, it's dangerous. Like all it does is the algorithm on TikTok isn't censored, so it's just like whatever has the highest engagement and stuff like that. That's what's gonna, as on Instagram, it's different unless you're actually looking those things up. So it's like already you can see how there's two different worlds that you could be in just by, if you're on TikTok or Instagram, your whole perception of your day is going to be different. Because if I'm on Instagram talking about France, I can't wait to go to France again.
Yeah, look how beautiful it is. Wow.
Right. And somebody else is going, fuck, are you seeing what's happening in France? Never go there. It's crazy right now. Like they're trying to end, you know what I mean? And so like that's already like our information is so manipulated already, you know?
Yeah, and that's why it's getting out of control, is because the algorithms now just operate based on people's actions and just are scaled out across every platform, and they don't actually have any type of like human nature to them, where they're actually trying to preserve like all these different things that happen inside of us. Like they aren't able to do that. And
Mm.
so we have to get back to a place where we recognize this and we say, okay, now the technology that's been created with the blockchain, self custody, ownership can finally kind of, at least in the short term, free us from being slaves to this, you know?
You got it. You got it, man. And we got a lot of people in the chat, Ryan, that came to see you, buddies. We got My Collectibles. You know, we got Sleeping in here. We got Maddie. We've got Blockchain, Digital Snowflake. We got so many VV Belgian. I mean, so many people are, they love you, man. So I want to go back. We got some questions. I don't know if you're
Yeah,
down.
let's answer some questions. Sorry, we were getting a little bit
We're
like
getting,
more ideology type stuff.
what I liked it though. Like, I mean, it's nice to, and I think people appreciate it because we're all like learning, right, about this ecosystem and what, and everybody's got their different expertise. Some people know the blockchain really well. Some people are more philosophical. Some people understand macroeconomics, crypto. So it's like nice to get into all the discussions. But we'll start off back here. So Superstar Money says, you know, we've seen Vivi start advertising on Instagram, which is pretty damn cool for onboarding. And has the team talked about like user retention or any examples of plans to kind of keep people here, I guess, because I guess some people are leaving.
Yeah, I think, I would like to just disclose, I think a lot of people are leaving because they're not necessarily making a bunch of money.
True.
Now. I think there is a lot of people in the ecosystem that came during the hype. I'll even include myself in that, because I came to VV when I saw from a TikTok talking about the golden moments. Like, that's when I came into VV, right? So I was kind of like on the hype train too, because I like the IP and whatnot. But I think a lot of people are like, oh, there's not a lot of money to be made anymore, I'm bouncing, And so I think it's a great question. So the question was, what is VV's plan to retain the current customer base, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you heard the last AMA with Mitch. He had mentioned something to the extent of how in quarter 2, a big focus is going to be revamping the app to match the new branding and create a better user experience, right? And then you pair that and couple that with MCP,
Right.
and then you also pair that and couple that with MCP now morphing or merging with OUP. So I think when you think about those three things being incorporated into the app, I think something like that is going to create a brand new experience for the current people that are here that have been using the app for 2 years now, right?
Yeah.
Because we get it, we go on it, we see the same gray kind of background, we see the same interface, we interact, we go to the market, we participate in a drop, we put something in augmented reality. But I think what people that have been here want is something fresh, something new, something different, right? And so when I look at it from that standpoint, and then I hear Mitch talk about the whole app is being revamped, you're going to now see MCP in a brand new way. It's going to continue to be developed. You're going to be able to use these points towards things, right? And on top of that, you're going to be able to actually have an incentive now to collect things on the app, instead of just going for a drop and trying to get the cheapest one or the coolest minute floor or whatever. There's an incentive now to hold something. There's an incentive now to collect a specific piece. And then you see that even further for all the people that came to Vivi because of the OMI token. There's been like this narrative that Vivi's neglecting the OMI token and it's not being incorporated anymore. We're ignoring it. Like, that's the furthest thing from the truth, because the OMI token is a massive part of this whole entire ecosystem, and Vivi's aware that so many of the people that love the project came because of that, right? And so now hearing that MCP and OUP are going to be a hybrid type of system, when you see those two things like try to kind of come together now in the app in real time and you're actually interacting with it, I think that's going to be one of the most that's going to be one of the most powerful tools to create retention.
I got you. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And I think like I think even for me, like the hardest part is just like seeing your sets go down in price. You're like, oh man, like that was this. And I thought that was the bottom. And it's almost like every month there seems to be like a new bottom, you know? And it's like, that's the hard part. Cause like as a collector, you're like, okay, how do I shift the money and to ensure something's more sustainable? But then it's like, I think like you said, with the MCP and having like higher allocation and more incentives to hold is going to be a great step in kind of helping that get back. And I think on top of that, with like the macro conditions, with like NFTs not necessarily being like, you know, their most lucrative time ever, or with people having a lot of different negative sentiment towards it, you know, that could also be something that is like left outside of your control to a certain way. But I have one, you know, question. Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say too, just to piggyback off that, I see somebody commented, Belgium, what's up? MCP works. Already bought 4 sets I don't like. So, but it, you know, I get it. Like it's a joke, but think about it, right? Even though something may increase or decrease in value that you're holding, now if you know that you're accruing daily points that are potentially going to unlock something that you really care about or want in the future, you're not so much concerned anymore about necessarily the price and when should I sell it. You're more so like, oh, I'm going to be a real holder of this because I know it's going to unlock something for me. And so creating more things like that in the app to make it beyond just a marketplace, to actually start gamifying this stuff and creating incentives for actual collectors who want to be here, hold on to these things, work their way towards other things. That creates retention. That gets people excited.
I agree with that. And what's really unique about what you guys have created is like this live marketplace where essentially like everything can be sold and bought almost instantaneously. So people now, like as an example, I bet you like there's a ton of people that bought like the secret rare Tales of Suspense for 800 thinking, oh, that's a great deal. Let me wait till it hits the 1.6K, sell it, then recycle those gems. But like, man, some people hold on to these, you know, if you look in the real world, these comics for like 20 plus years. And it's only really through the power of NFTs that like utility and all this demand for all these different features has come to fruition. When really in the physical realm, you buy something, it sits, and that's that, right? So it's like interesting to see the difference as well, and what people expect. And my collectible says, yo, I personally don't think twice about the people who have left. It's good that they did for their sake and everyone else's. So, I mean, yeah, like I'd love to have more people in here, you know, and then there's other people like, you know, Snare here that's like, you know, we're leaving because of interoperability and we want that. But I was only a year ago that like IMX and being on the blockchain was the biggest hesitation. So there's always, I think, and I'm hoping that that does happen, but I think like, you know, we obviously want to maintain and hold on to the users that we have, but I get either side of the coin there.
Can you bring up that last one? It said it was like a big no, and then
yeah,
we are leaving.
Yeah, so we're leaving because of no interoperability. This is the ethos of NFTs. It's simply a joke. I'm an OG, but this is cap. And I think
I think it's important though, like to not just write off people that are frustrated, right? It's very important to understand. It's very important to now he's bashing me. It's very important to understand the reasons why someone might leave, right? Even if it's in a disrespectful way or they don't care anymore, whatever. There might be actually like some real practical reasons why someone might leave, and to understand why, and then to address that person and take their feedback and then try to build that feedback into the way the app would operate in the future. So I don't necessarily like write everybody off that leaves. Yeah. If you want to leave, that's fine. Go do something else. But I think it's important to get the negative and the positive and everything in between.
Same.
So,
yeah, and I appreciate you know, addressing this stuff. And the thing with me that I try to do is I always try to have both sides of the conversation, and a lot of us do too. So I'm not saying that it's like unique to me, but I think it's just like, you know, it's the way things that are addressed too. It's like, you know, how do you approach that question in the right way? And you know, I know that like interoperability like is is obviously like important, but I think there's a lot of things that you guys have stated that it's not necessarily like off the table. Like I remember somebody on the team said that specifically. It's not like they said there wasn't going to be, but it was just like there was technological and licensor limitations or concerns, I think, that maybe weren't necessarily forecasted, if I'm not wrong, in terms of like why that kind of came to be, right?
I think Mitch had touched upon that in the last AMA, and he specifically talked about interoperability and building in the technology that would better allow for it, right? And so it's not just a licensor issue. It's also it's a lot of different facets that are factored into why interoperability would be incorporated into the app and how it would be, right? Because at the end of the day, like, we see things front facing, we see tweets, we see messages and things like that. But like, Vivi's running a business, and businesses are extremely complex, and there's a lot of conversations that need to be had before things are just done, right? And so while it's awesome to see other platforms incorporating interoperability, we also have to keep in mind that they're working with their own IP. Like, the person who created an NFT project on OpenSea is the owner of that IP. They can do with it whatever they want. They can build it however they want. They can market it however they want. DC and Palm, like, if they want to go interoperable, right, they don't have to worry about how they use their own IP, right? They do with it what they want. But Veve is a conduit of IP, so they are creating avenues in which people will collect another IP. It's not their own IP that they own, right? And so that's a completely different dynamic that has to be considered when it's not as simple as let's go interoperable. Like, the amount of conversations and systems and processes that have to be put in place before that happens is tremendous. And so, interoperability is in the future, but the ways in which it might look might be different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so here's where I find it so interesting, and I love all those points that you brought up, because the one thing that I keep saying to people too is, if you take like 8 million NFTs and you stick them out, like, and they're all of a sudden now interoperable, I think a lot of the reason why, like, a lot of those things wouldn't necessarily go up. It would flood the market so much, saturate the market so much, and I think it would only, the most important things like the Grail things would be searchable and do really well. And I feel like the MCP component helps kind of everything in the ecosystem stay, elevated and eyes on. Like, I worry that we could also like potentially lose some of the community in Veve if everything kind of shifted out. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I don't want that to happen, but all my point is to what I'm saying is, I think there's a lot of conversations, and then the whole licensor fees things, the whole thing that you guys are getting so much IP, I don't know if that's part of the appeal. But I mean, I do think that, like, from what I'm seeing here is like a lot of people kind of want that to be the next logical step, whether that be not now, but like soon. And I think I'm still hopeful that, it's going to happen. And that's why I'm still so bullish on this. And I think, like, because it's Disney and Marvel, and I'm already seeing like DC as an example, like through Hero, doing that stuff and making moves forward. So I think and in my opinion, I think it's inevitable. I think the competition is going to make it even more appealing. Because they're going to want to have to compete. But I do think that it'll be a while, if I'm being honest. I think there's a lot of other things that need to come down the pipeline, but that's just me. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an extremely important piece of the picture, right? It would be great to be able to put my AF-15 into cold storage, right? Like, nobody wouldn't say that. Understanding more about what that whole world is and why you would want to do that, like, it makes a lot of sense because you own it. It can never be taken away, no matter what. So that's very important. But I think what's even bigger than, well, it's not bigger, but it's just as important, is the idea that as we become more and more digital, that we're going to be spending more and more time in a metaverse, right? And having these types of conversations. And on top of everything else that Vive's building, they're also building a metaverse where all this IP is going to be housed.
Which is insane. Yeah. Which
Right. So, and we're going to see first iterations of that, as talked about in the last AMA. with Mitch about in mid-April, right? So very shortly in the near future, we're going to start to be able to see how a lot of this stuff is coming together in a new season of Vivi, right? This wasn't on all of our radar a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, but now we're actually going to see a tangible form of the ViviVerse.
Yeah,
And we're
man.
actually going to see the ability to have social interactions in a kind of Web3 world on Vivi. So I think that's also going to spark a lot of like excitement and just kind of pull the reins back on all of the speculation and things that are people are forecasting without really actually knowing everything that's going into this.
Yeah, man. And I mean, I think a lot of us are excited about like, especially these beta invites and like what you guys have been doing. And you know, one thing I just want to reiterate too is like in this chat, like, and people, if you address, like, if you say something in the right way and you still are like very critical, like, I will 100% talk about what you're saying. But when you're just coming here to be mean and to be rude and to like put people down, that to me is just silly. And I think like it kind of speaks to your character as well. And I mean, I know like a lot of us are like crypto guys, we're just trying to make a buck too, but I just think like that to me is just one of my biggest things. Like you could just address, you have a question, just address it in the right way. And I think like, you know, no need to call somebody else like a normie if they believe in
Listen,
this
man.
project. You know?
Listen, man. I'm probably more a normie than most might think.
Listen, I'm
I'm
a fucking normie too. I'm just saying like,
a
you know, I just think it's important to just like be, you know, be like, we don't need to be rude. That's all I'm saying,
right.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's totally cool, man. I mean, at the end of the day, like when people say name call and say mean things, like it, I've always been the person to think that says a lot more about you than what it says about me, right? And so I just stay quiet, move on, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I try to look at what the person's actually saying besides all the negativity and try to chew on like what their point is, right?
For sure. It's
And
important,
so
right?
I don't discredit it. I just, yeah, don't be mean, but whatever.
Yeah. Man, I had one tweet and it was and I haven't blocked anyone, right? But I put something on Twitter and I forget what it was for, and somebody like made it an accusation about my wife. And I forget what it was, but I was like, usually I let it slide off my back, but like then it like I can only imagine what like fucking Elon Musk goes through on a daily basis, like Donald Trump. Like, man, those guys probably like get just completely shit on, right? So
Well, yeah, at some point it just becomes kind of noise that you have to just deal with. Like it's just part of the day-to-day job, you know?
and Snare, see, this is I appreciate that, Snare. See, I'm just reading your text, so I don't even know. So he's like, being a normie isn't a bad thing. This wasn't said in a rude way. It's addressing the concerns based on a different POV. Maybe if you, my bad if you take an offense. Yeah, see, this is,
Nah,
I
yeah.
appreciate that. Thanks, bro. And I didn't like, I didn't mean, I'm fucking soft today. I think, yeah. So, yeah, man.
Snare,
I
we
just,
love you, man.
yeah,
We
I
love
just because
Snare.
we love Snare. I think it's just because what I'm trying to say in all this is like we're doing our best, right? We're doing our fucking best to ensure that like everyone we're addressing some of the concerns, the issues. We you know we all want to see that progress, including Ryan here. And there's capacity. There's all these different things, right? There's macro events. There's all these things, and so like we want to push forward, but at the same time, there's like we have to have like a level of be critical and have a level of accountability, but at the same time be like somewhat sympathetic to what you guys are doing too. And I know that like from what I see with Mitch and talking with that guy, like he's like just freaking building out the MCP, like he's doing like 24/7 hours of day. You know what I mean? Like I know what you guys do is a lot too, so I just want to let you know like we also appreciate it, despite a lot of the things that you kind of like experience on a day-to-day basis, bro.
Yeah, man, it's a season, right? Like there's going to be seasons where you're on the mountain, there's going to be seasons where you're in the valley, and there's going to be seasons like in between, right? And so this is a season very much so that's a valley. You just got to work through the valley. It's part of the game, it's part of the journey, it's part of the road. And so when people are frustrated or people want to see something, you don't shut them off. You go through the journey with them and try to help them understand more why it might not be in the time they may want it. You know, you can't please everybody. Vivi's
You
not going to
can't.
please everybody. And here's the thing where it comes back to the business side is, if I don't want Vivi answering all of the questions, I don't want Vivi addressing every single time an error happens, claiming why this happened and what they have to fix, right? Because at the end of the day, there's always going to be missteps, there's always going to be errors, there's always going to be failures. It's part of any good business. And if a massive amount of their time is consumed with trying to address every time a concern comes up, they're not able to now put that time and energy into creating a better product. And so while there's a lot of conversation out on Twitter or out on YouTube or out on social media, like, you have to remember that Vivi is still investing the most of its time and energy into creating a better product. And as long as they stay focused on that, that is what's going to make Vivi successful in the future. Vivi is not going to be more successful because they made somebody happy about the comment they made on Twitter. It's about building a better product for the people that are using it to create the best possible collecting experience. Yeah. I want their time, I want their energy consumed with that. Everything else is going to happen the way it's going to happen. There's going to be seasons of FUD. There's going to be seasons of, oh my gosh, we're going to the moon. There's going to be seasons of like, oh man, I feel like I'm in limbo. You know, it's
100%.
inevitable. And so if we try to concern ourselves with all these human natural responses, it's just going to be weighing us down.
But my favorite part is going to be like if this does take off, right? Let's say like the next bull, things are going to like all-time highs or like whatever, right? Even if it does, like some of the stuff's going back to 50K or whatever. I just can't wait till somebody comes in on the AMAs like, blessings to Vivi and blessings to you, Ryan. And like, you know, it's just like, you know, like they're going to turn into Teletubbies, man, in the bull market, right? And it's like, that's...
Well, we all, I mean, everybody is nicer when they feel a sense of security, right?
Yeah.
Like when I have a sense of security, and a lot of people have that sense of security based on their financial situation, right? People's financial situations, not just in Vivi, but on a world global scale, are really difficult right now. So people don't have their sense of security because a lot of us put that into financial means. So whenever that insecurity comes out, something that might not be an issue becomes a massive issue because we're sensitive, you know, we're insecure about our standing. And so I get it, man. I do the same things in my day-to-day life. I'm human just like anybody else. We all are, right? There's things that are frustrating, but at the same time, I would say that, you know, when these things happen, your response is going to be the decider of whether or not you get through it or not.
You got it, bro. And I think that's what it is, right? It's like continuing to be like optimistic and like, you know, seeing like this course kind of prevail. And I still think in terms of like all the fundamentals and the foundation that Vivi stands on, like it, in my opinion, will succeed big time, right? And I do think that it, like you said, it's weathering a storm right now. There's a lot of things that, you know, people were promised and wanted and it didn't come to on time, or some of it didn't come through yet. And I think, you know, it makes sense, right? But I think like ultimately when everybody's bags were full and everyone was making money, it didn't really matter what the underlying circumstances were behind it, because, you know, everyone was selling in the green and everyone was happy, and people were happy to buy something at 14K, you know, and now they're having a hard time buying something at $30, right? So it's just interesting, like the psychology.
Yeah, I was watching listening to another podcast, and it was the Web3 Academy. I don't know if you've ever listened to that podcast, but it was really interesting because it was about the Doodles project.
Yeah.
You aware of the Doodles?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so a huge project, right? And I guess like there was a big uproar or viral moment where the owner of the Doodles like came out in Discord and said, Doodles is no longer like an NFT project. We're becoming a media franchise. And he was basically telling people that wanted to get out, you know, if you don't want to be here, get out of here. You know, it's fine, right? Like, and the people that were on the podcast talking about this were basically addressing the issue. If you own an NFT, is it like a shareholder, being a shareholder in a company, right? Like that was the question they were addressing. And so when people have an NFT, should they get a say in the way the company operates, right? And so it was really interesting because they were talking from both sides. And on one side, the community is everything. The way you address the community, the way you incorporate them into the bigger vision of the project is important.
Yeah.
At the same time, if every single person that owns that NFT starts making decisions for the company, there's no longer a person with the one vision that can take you into the future, right?
Yeah.
The reason why you buy into an NFT project isn't just because of the NFT, it's because of the person who created it. It's because they can see into the future. They have a vision for what things should be like, right? And so it was I would encourage you to go listen to it because it was just a really cool conversation.
Yeah.
But that's still even a question that I try to understand more is owning an NFT. What type of conversation or what does that do for you as a person who's part of this ecosystem and company,
Yeah, so I mean, I love what you brought up there, and I think like even with the ViviVerse, like the way that I kind of envisioning it starting is more like a kind of an advanced showroom that maybe you could walk around with like an avatar, right? Like that's kind of how I see this happening, and then potentially having some people be able to visit my showroom, like that I could have like people and connections. So I mean, already, like the way that I envision that is like me discussing the importance of those NFTs, the fandom behind it, in a way that like other communities aren't going to be as wide in scope because they're like focused in like the doodles are focused in on that specific purpose. As like you can talk about Spider-Man, you could talk about Star Wars, you can talk about Disney, you can talk about Walt Disney, you could talk about like DC, you can do so like James Bond. There's so many things and conversations to have, and I think like the ViviVerse will be able to kind of help that out even more so. And I think also distract's not the right word, but like keep people like happy with other features other than just like ROI the whole time. Like, oh, is this going up or this going down? Hey, I want to buy that so I can be a part of the club, or I could use it in the ViviVerse or hang it on my wall because I really like that. And so like it'll have different use applications. And so I think that it's going to evolve, right? It's going to take a while, but right now it's kind of at this very early infrastructure where the number one things that people see is just dollar signs. And I think like, obviously all those things we talked about, like interoperability, ViviVerse, all that stuff, I think is on the way, but I do think it's going to get more elaborate and more advanced as we enter into this new space. Kind of like even like seeing what Spatial is doing right now with their metaverses and stuff. It's pretty remarkable. And imagine like even for me, man, I can have my own NFT Pirates club. I could have my Miles Morales club. We can maybe post up like 50 or 60 or 70 Miles secret rares in my house and like take a picture and just flex and fuck around for 2 hours. You know what I mean? So I think it's cool, right?
The ViviVerse like ties a lot of this together, I think, in a lot of ways, because that was the vision from day one, is to create a place where people can come together and collect together, right? And evolving more into something that isn't just a marketplace, but an actual experience in a digital world where collecting can become something it never was before. I think that's really what the ViviVerse is about. And so
that's a good way of saying it. I just want to like that's collecting could be something it's never been before. That's really cool,
Yeah, I think that's what the ViviVerse does, right? Like Vivi, there's not a lot of people. The collectors, it's interesting because the collectors aren't always the most vocal, but there are so many of them on the app who are buying things that they just genuinely love and like, that they could never essentially get their hands on in the real world. I could never touch an AF-15 in the real world. I can never afford it, but I can go into this app and actually have the first appearance of Spider-Man and own it and put it one day on my wall in the ViviVerse. Like there's only going to be able to be 150 people putting an AF-15 secret rare on their wall in the ViviVerse. There's only 150 people of potentially hundreds of thousands, millions one day.
Right.
150 of them will have an AF-15 secret rare hanging on their wall,
which is insane, right? And like that's where like I get super bullish because I'm like, man, you know, and that's the reason I'm here. Like even some of like we talked about, like just some of these common comics that you guys have that are like grails in the real world. I just think that, like, in my opinion, I still think they might have the highest ROI because I'm like, who wouldn't want something that you cannot afford in the real world and still have scarcity, still have the first kind of on-chain thing, and then being able to use it in a social place where like 20 to 50 people could like talk about it with you. Like that's where this is all going. Like that's the excitement behind this shit, man.
Yeah, there's still there's a lot to be excited about. We're just kind of distracted right now with a lot of things at the end of the day are not going to be things that are part of the conversation in 2, 3, 5 years.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like you said before, man. We're just going through these different steps. And Omi Daily Burns in here too, man. He's been doing some awesome videos, and you know he's the guy that gets really into that blockchain stuff. And he says My Collectibles is right. Their aim is mass market. Mass market is not the crypto community right now, but allowing after interoperability will gain a significant group as well, all in due time with tech. And dude, I just want to like harp about that. Like the accessibility, you know, inclusivity and everything that Veve has is miles ahead of so many other projects. Like the fact that you can just buy an NFT by clicking on your phone, pressing buy now. Like even, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm a little weird that I don't like to like sell something off for like sometimes a new drop. So like I'll actually buy gems sometimes on the fly, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I do I have any gems? Okay, boom boom, and before you know it, I just put in a few hundred gems in the app. And it's like, you know, there's things like that where really you're miles ahead of the competition in terms of that aspect, definitely. And then on top of that, having relatable, recognizable, big fucking IP of like the most, you know, famous characters worldwide. I mean, that to me is like speaks volumes, right? So sure, there's like these other components that I think still need to kind of come through, but at the same time, like I still think, you know, in a lot of aspects, like Veve's still a huge winner, man.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to just see how the ecosystem plays out, man. I mean, there's so many cool businesses out there that are being built right now, and so many amazing projects with IP people love, man. And so I think the whole ecosystem is extremely abundant. There's a lot of opportunities to have awesome experiences, and you know, at the end of the day, I personally want to see Veve deliver a great product.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the season where they were at, they delivered it in an amazing way, right? The augmented reality of massive IPs, first ever appearances in the blockchain as NFTs. You can see it in a Mutascan. Then they shifted to IMX. Like these are all massive accomplishments that are kind of just overlooked, right?
I know.
And so, but at the same time now, we're embarking on a new season. And so, you know, I think we overlook sometimes like how important a person like Mitch is to this whole entire ecosystem, because, you know, you look at the last AMA and something that was highlighted was development delivery cycles, right? And that is such an important piece because in the past, Veve would kind of like work on something and roll it out one thing at a time. But now with Mitch kind of at the helm of the development and building teams that could work simultaneously on different features and functions, you don't just get now MCP coming into the app. You get MCP, a revamped app, and then maybe an OMI utility program all at one time, right? And so I'm not saying that's coming all at once, but what I'm saying is things are developed far quicker now. And we're going to see how that plays out in this new season of 6 months to 12 months. And it's going to completely reshape the way we interacted and engaged with Veve ever before. And so I think that's something that we should try to, you know, celebrate and be excited about too.
I totally agree, man. And I think that's what people forget is like at that time, to me, in a way, because I was such on a big blockchain guy, like going like not in terms of like the technological component behind it, but in terms of the significance of it. When the IMX transition happened, that to me was the safeguard securing the timestamps of these assets on the blockchain forever. And on top of that, on through IMX and hopefully one day onto Ethereum as well, like that's where that interface between the two exists. So I was like, okay, you guys got on Ethereum blockchain, like this is crazy big. And so like I think that's just like important too, like even though the cash out right now is another thing that's kind of taken a bit of a hiatus for the interim, that was still another major accomplishment as well, right? And so like we've seen you guys deliver, like time and time again, but there's also been a lot of things that have been delayed or pushed back, but I'm confident that they will be delivered. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, they will be delivered, right? They will
Yeah.
come. I think one of the hard parts too is like in the past, even before I was here, there were a lot of things that were talked about just kind of in like a
Casually. Yeah.
free way, just kind of throwing it out there type of way, where we, or the people that were putting it out there just didn't really understand the gravity of what they were actually saying, and so I think a lot of people are unfair to VV in holding them to every single little thing that's been said, when in reality, like, it wasn't that those things weren't going to happen. It probably just was very underestimated how those things would happen and when they would take place.
Yeah. I think that's what it was too. And I think there was like, if we would have said, hey, like that's the goal is to go here instead of being like,
the goal is, instead of saying it is coming,
it is by April, this is how or whatever, right? It's just like, hey, like this is where we are in terms of the roadmap, like these are the long-term vision, no guarantee on these things, we were headed there, but there's no, and I think like that clarity from early on would have helped people's potential investment strategy, because they're basing those principles being like, oh well, interoperability is 2 years away, so I'm going to throw down X, right? But it's like it is like any investment is, well, actually, I always say I should watch that. And any collection it can be risky, right? Like these are some of the things that the concerns and the risks that you take.
Yeah, I mean, day one, back to basics is don't put money into speculative things that you can't afford to lose. Like that's any financial advisor would tell you that. But at the same time, this isn't really an investment. This is a collector's app, and so it's very important to continue to hit that nerve, continue to build that out, and give the collector the best possible experience. And as a byproduct, if people want to come here and make money, that's great, do that, but that is not the reason why Veve exists.
Yeah, and I think that's what's difficult, right, for a lot of people is like they came in here purposely for that one reason.
Yeah, and people will tell you that openly. Yeah. Like there's a lot of people, and even myself. Like, did I not see an opportunity to make some money? Yeah, of course. But as you learn more and more about the company, what they want to be, you start to see that this whole thing is so much bigger than money, and it really will be one of the greatest places in the digital world to collect things. Yeah. And so that's why I'm here, and that's why I enjoy what I do every day.
Dude, and like that's the thing, man. Even for me, like the accomplishments that you guys already have as well, like with like the likes of Disney and Marvel, like fucking NFTs, where they've even acknowledged it themselves on so many different occasions. Like Disney retweeted that whole thing out, like being like, hey, here's the golden moments. Like I think that probably brought on at least 10,000 plus new users just like that. Yeah. And like, for me, I'm like, okay, like clearly there's like a strong relationship here, but at the same time, I was like, I think because of the way that NFTs are viewed right now, and because of how volatile they've been, I also think from a PR perspective, a lot of companies may still see the tech and the evolution of these things as very beneficial and positive long term, but in the interim, don't want to have any potential negative media attention or damage their brand. Even like as an example, like Sergio Aguero, the soccer player, was tweeting about Captain America, the secret rare, during Christmas, I think, of 2021. he was like showing that there was like baseball players, but like, you know, but nobody has really done too much of that since, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, my wonder is like, could he still be collecting? Like, you know what I mean? So it's like that's where I think the other component of this is too, is like they're trying to navigate the waters at a macro level so that like they're not jumping the gun. People come in too early, you get your first introduction, nothing's already completely fixed. Like, you know, like there's no cash out right now as an example. So it's like wait till all the components are working, you know, the lubricants in there that's been going for a few years. And then maybe you get Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, all those guys simultaneously being like, we're going into this digital space. Come check out our digital products. Here they are. And all of a sudden, before you know it, like, you know, Ryan, you're working with the big boys at that point, you know?
No, man, I'm a peasant. I will stand by that statement. But yeah, I'm extremely disposable. But nonetheless, I'm, you know, Vivi turned me into a collector. In
Yeah.
one way, I hate him for it because now I'm like putting things in my basement that don't go with the aesthetic of my wife's taste. but in the same breath, I'm like, man, this is really cool to learn more about this space and why it's so important. And so, you know, Vivi did all that for me. And so, like, I have a special place in my heart for them, the people who enjoy it, the people who are here, and, you know, why this exists and why it's going to continue to evolve. I think the other thing that is really important is the education of this. Like, we have to go through the 5-year, the hard work of doing the education phase and helping people understand, like, as with the Sesame Street drop, you saw the backlash of NFTs destroy the earth. Like,
Yeah.
they're not good for the world. They eat up all of our energy, things like that, right? But like the Ethereum blockchain is, based on what I'm learning and what I'm trying to understand, uses significantly less energy than, for instance, the Bitcoin blockchain, right? Because it's a proof of stake rather than a proof of work type of blockchain, which doesn't use as much energy. So I'm learning more about that to understand how to educate and tell more people about the actual benefits of the NFTs that are on Veve and the carbon neutrality and how they're actually not harming the ecosystem. But yeah, just doing that education alone, based on the sentiment from the Sesame Street drop, could be the thing. It's not the IPs.
Yeah.
It's not the artists. It's like, oh, these NFTs aren't actually destroying the earth.
Yeah.
There is low energy being used to create these. Like, okay, now I can get on board. So you have a whole ecosystem of people that are just not getting on NFTs because they think they're evil and they eat up too much energy and they're bad for the earth and they're not sustainable. But as you do more education about the blockchain in which Veve NFTs are housed and how it doesn't eat up a lot of energy, I think that's a very, very important thing to be hitting on consistently.
So this is so fascinating that you say that, because I think that is a massive prohibitor that's like, you know, all these things are happening kind of outside of the control, not only of Veve, but of like the whole crypto and NFT space as a whole, right? There's still those prohibitors there. And it's like, if you look at anything in history, right? Like my wife is, she's Black, right? You know that. And man, like we were looking up in some states, it was like, I think it was like 2012. There was one state that just allowed interracial marriage, right? I know.
That's still a thing.
That's not even, it could have been 2002, but if you look it up, but my
Wow.
point is like, how many years did it take for like these things to slowly get implemented, right? Where there's all this backlash and then it's like, then you get to the place you're supposed to be and you're like, okay, like now I get it. Why would I even think that that's a concept that is allowed, right? And it's like, that's kind of where we are with NFTs. I think it's like, people aren't using their augmented reality glasses. They're not understanding what the use case is. Like you said, they think it's bad for the environment. They think they're going to lose all this money, you know, and it's like, there's still so much that can come from this. And why don't you just start off and just buy a comic that you like or something like that and put it in AR, start there, you know, just make an entry that's not going to break the bank, that even if it does go to zero, you're prepared. And it's pretty affordable. Like I'd say for some of these, like they're $2 comics. I mean, just to experience, like think about it, for $2 you can experience a comic that you own in augmented reality and be able to flip through the pages and all these things and be part of a community. That's the entry point on Veve. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, and I think another part of the picture too needs to become showcasing the NFTs we own in Veve in real life. So for me, like I would love to be able to have like a little holographic stand, right, with a holographic fan in it that attaches to my Veve wallet, and then I can bring up like my AF-15 as a hologram on my desk. Like I think that is another place we need to go, because that ties in like that whole digital ecosystem. And somebody says, holy smokes, you know, what is that? And then it's a talking point to onboard them to Veve. Like, oh yeah, you could do this too with your digital assets, you know? And so not just like the augmented reality glasses, which I think are going to be extremely important in making the case for digital assets, right? Because, you know, 20 years ago, the first iPhone was coming out, and people started trying to understand like, oh, I'll never get that touchscreen smartphone thing. I'm keeping my flip phone. But now everybody has one of these, right? In the same way, people are going to adopt augmented reality glasses that can connect to a wallet, that you can now place things that you own in your world that you see, right? And so just in that way, as we wait for people to get onboarded just through that use case, I think we also have to build practical ways for people to showcase these NFTs in real life, in their everyday activities.
That is so fucking cool, man. Okay, so you just got me thinking, because I'm like, I would be amazed if I showed up to somebody's office and he's a big CEO or something, and he's got like AF-15 SR behind him spinning. He's got Darth Vader pulling out his friggin' like lightsaber, and all these things are in my, like, not in my augmented reality, in my actual like view because of holograms, right? And like maybe like that's the second phase, but even augmented reality, like if everyone's wearing glasses, right, or a majority of people like phones, and you walk into somebody's office and they're like, hey, turn on setting 1, and you press and you're dialed into this person's like collectibles. Now I'm in a room and I'm viewing everything that you own that you want to showcase.
Exactly.
Right, like that's just so cool, right?
And there's a company that I'm actually tied to. It's called Holovision. So it's HOLOVISN, right? And it's actually a company. They were just at the Fashion Week or whatever a couple weeks ago, and they build holographic fans to put in entertainment venues to showcase new products, right? So essentially you upload a file to the computer, it'll then populate into the fan, and it'll actually create a 3D rotating images that people can experience and see. So for instance, if there's a new Nike Air Max shoe dropping, right, they could actually put that in the store as a holographic fan to showcase the shoe to people before it's actually in the store, and they can see it and feel it, right? Sick. So I want to see like Veve incorporate something like that, a product like that, where we can actually now bring these things into the real world and showcase them to people. Just like, you know, I'm sitting at my desk. Oh, wow, look at that digital asset, AF-15. And then like, oh, scan this QR code, go to the app, go get yours, you know, stuff like that.
That's so crazy. And then be like, if you want it, you can buy it off me right now for $22,000. You know, but somebody's sales guy too. Hey, welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah. But how many people are going to see that? Like, you have the pictures on the wall behind you, right? But you see the hologram like right off the bat, just because it's like, it's one of those sexy, flashy things that is new age, next gen, right?
So true. I'm actually surprised that there hasn't been more tech on that. Like, I don't know enough about like holograms.
Well,
but
it's developing right now.
Yeah.
Like that company I told you about, if you go check them out, holovision.com, like the technology that they're incorporating for businesses to bring holographic things to life just in practical ways is insane. Like there's even one of the technologies they're working on is to incorporate into restaurants, where, you know, let's say like a restaurant's doing $5 fireball shots, right? They would actually have a hologram that would showcase over like where the fireball would be on the bar behind them. and it would be like flashing, having fire coming out and like flashing $5, right? So now you're seeing this as like, this is a complete and new way to market to people too,
Right.
is holographic fans that you can upload different files to that could actually tell people and showcase to people what is on sale, what you want them to buy, things like that.
So this is cool because I really think I like the holographic thing better than I do augmented reality. And the reason for that is that the first thing is that not everybody's going to be wearing glasses, AR glasses. So like right away, there's already fewer people that are going to see whatever you're doing. Then I presume there's also going to be like different settings where you can allow, almost like Bluetooth, where you can allow other people to view what you're viewing, or if they're going to have their own separate reality and you have your own, as like with like a hologram, if everyone's got their glasses off, everyone can see what you're showcasing, right? So
Exactly.
that's pretty cool.
Like for instance, even some of the fans that they've incorporated are things you just attach to the dashboard of your car, right?
Wow.
And you can upload your NFT or you can upload a file to it,
Yeah.
and it'll just go right to the fan. It'll come up as a hologram, and it will just turn and rotate. Now, could you imagine being in traffic and someone looks over at your car and they just see like, you know, holographic item just spinning on your dashboard?
Yeah,
Like I want my AF-15 on the dashboard of my car.
100%, man. I mean, like, yeah, like, and that's what I mean. Like, even like, I'm just thinking of, and this is where it's going to be interesting to also see what these assets mean, because you can also scale them too, right? So, like, a comic book might be a classy, cool little thing that kind of is hologram projected beside you, that's kind of moving around like back and forth, or maybe like the cover is animated. I don't know. But then it's like, then if you want to like take like an R2D2, you can literally make that the same size as R2D2 in real life, or at least in the shows, and then like have that going around your office.
Yeah, or even just like you get like the bigger holographic fan, right? Maybe it costs, you know, a couple of grand, and it's just life size in your office in the corner. And like, you know, I want to show somebody my R2D2, him circling around, wobbling around, you know, doing his thing. And it's just a cool experience. Like, I personally am going to spend 2, 3, 5 grand to create that experience for somebody who comes into my office.
And see, this is what I mean. And this is the possibilities that I see that are so far out that I'm like, maybe this does or doesn't happen with these VV assets. But I'm like, that's where I'm excited, because I'm like, I'm presuming that like, because Marvel and Disney and all these big companies made their entry here, and these are NFTs they've acknowledged in themselves, and there's a long-term relationship, that like they're going to want to see these evolve as the use case becomes more attractive and technologically advanced, right? So it's like, that's where I'm like, okay, I'm buying something now that I'm not necessarily sure what it all means 10 years from now, but I'm hoping it means more than just what I'm buying. You know what I mean? At in the store kind of thing.
And it will mean much more.
Yeah.
Like, we are in the Atari version of Veve, of blockchain, of all of the things and possibilities that are going to come, right? I mean, this technology is here to stay. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, when it translates to collecting IPs, I think we're just on the cusp of what is to come. And you're going to start seeing, you know, people with holographic capabilities just in daily life, man. I mean, people will be carrying holograms. People will have their AR glasses. People will be spending 3, 5, 8 hours a day in the metaverse, having meetings, visiting people's showrooms, like whatever it may be. Like, people will incorporate the metaverse into their daily life. And so when that stuff starts to happen over the next 5 to 10 years, like the use case for a licensed NFT in the blockchain becomes so much greater.
So accurate, bro. Well, listen, Ryan, we've been chatting for an hour and a half. You've been cooking up in your car. I've got a pack now. I'm off to the Caribbean for a little bit, so that'll be fun.
Wow, let's go.
Yeah, so it'll be a good little break. But
wait, so how long are you going there for?
Not long, just a week, just a little,
just a week,
little bathing, you know, in the sun. Yeah. So it'll be fun, man. But I appreciate you, bro. Like, I just want you to know, like, you know, I appreciate you going into all these discussions, learning, you know, sharing your perspective, everything you're doing behind the social media management component, and you know, and I know there's like a lot of questions that people had, and I think we did a good job of like definitely tackling both sides of the story. And I think it's just good, right? Like to continue, like you said, to continue to learn, to talk, to enjoy other people's company, and then just to see like the long-term play that Vivi has for us. So yeah, I wanted to thank you for, taking the time and coming on, brother.
Yeah, man. I first off, I hope you have an awesome vacation, man. You have safe travels. Dude, I don't really bring much to the table, but I like having the conversations, right? Like I could never get on here and bring to the table what maybe Alex or Mitch or Dan or David brings to the table, right? But I do think it's extremely important just to be engaged with the community, to hear the conversations that are happening, to give people a voice, because every voice matters. And so that's what I kind of look at as my job and what I want to do. And so, yeah, man, if nobody took anything away, that's cool. But I'm very, very bullish about the future of what this all means for us. And it's going to become a big part of our daily lives. If it already isn't, it already is, because we're all addicted to VV anyways, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah, Rise. Thanks again, buddy. And I definitely think people got a lot out of today, and also had fun because we went into some really cool philosophical examples, and we kind of thought about the future. And so it wasn't just like, hey, what's the status on this, and that's why I wanted to have you back on. It's not just about that. Like, it's about the community, it's about these kind of discussions, and to have fun ultimately, right?
Yeah, and I think there will be a time in the future where we jump on here and we can just talk practically about what's next.
Yeah.
Let's let some of these things roll out that are in the queue, right? We got ViviVerse phase 1, or the initial beta rollout of that.
Bro, get me on the beta, okay? Like, do something.
I have zero power to get anybody on anything. But beta, that's going out to beta users mid-April. You got MCP, they're getting really aggressive with giving that to all users across the board, making that public. And so, and then, more to come. So we'll jump back on a stream. Maybe we could even get Mitch on here, or Alex, or somebody else to talk through some of the forecast, some of the future.
I love that, bro. And everyone's like, yeah, Ryan, get me on the beta. And people just appreciating, like, great debate and open discussion. All opinions count. And like, thanks, Ryan, for always being so open and being part of the VV fam, bro. We appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you guys. Love you all. And thanks for going easy on me. Let me be a part of the crew.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan.